Hello, it is Jen Frazier, CEO and founder of Firefly Partners. I'm here with another episode of UnTangled here on LinkedIn Live. We're talking with nonprofits about outreach, challenges, technology, different strategies, things that are going on in our current crazy landscape. And today, I'm joined by the most amazing and fabulous Cathy Renna, Communications Director of the National LGBTQ Task Force, longtime friend, partner in the space. Happy, thrilled, excited to have you here, Cathy. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, maybe a little bit where are you? Love to hear more about where you are right now. You're coming to us live from the hotel.
Absolutely. I'm happy to do this, Jen. It's good to see you. And greetings to those out in LinkedIn land. So, like I said, my name is Cathy Renna. My pronouns are she, her. I'm currently the communications director at the National LGBTQ Task Force, which is the nation's oldest queer advocacy organization. We celebrated our 50th anniversary a couple of years ago. I am based out of North Jersey, but I'm currently in Atlanta. I'm actually attending the LGBTQ plus Journalists Association annual convention, which is about 600 or so LGBTQ and allied journalists from all over the country who come together to, this year is going to be interesting. Let's put it that way. The conference started today. I'll be here through Sunday, and I think we're going to have some really interesting conversations. As a communications person, I just, it's important to be in dialogue with the folks who are as much on the front lines as we are in many ways, particularly those who are out in the newsroom. So it's going to be a time. Just real briefly about me. I mean, I've been doing this work for a very long time, it's now more than half my life. So like 30 plus years. I worked at GLAAD for many years. I've had my own consulting firm for many, many years as well, Renna Communications and then Target Q. I have worked almost exclusively within the queer space of public relations, communications, crisis comms, media training, all of that stuff. And I feel frankly, very honored to find myself at the task force. I've always worked with the task force my entire career. I've attended Creating Change, probably almost all of the 37 years we've been doing it. But I started working on contract years ago around Creating Change and big campaigns like Queer the Vote, Queer the Census, things like that, and often just come in to support the comms team. And then when COVID hit, things got turned upside down, of course, for all of us. And I was asked to be the interim comms director. And then towards the end of 2020, our now president, Kiera Johnson, who was deputy at the time, very persuasive, very visionary, talked me into joining the staff, which after all these years in that age, I was surprised, like I'm gonna be a full-time staff person at a big giant queer organization.
Right.
And it's been really, it's actually been really amazing to be in the movement at this time with the task force, because the task force is very much the progressive voice in the queer movement and a queer voice in the progressive movement, and has always approached things with an intersectional lens. All issues are queer issues for us. And of course we work on those siloed issues like, marriage equality or, employment non-discrimination, but we also work on things like immigration, housing, racial equity, because our community is part of every community.
Absolutely.
We're kind of a microcosm of of our culture and our society. So, the task force is just a terrific organization to be a part of, and I feel very privileged to be part of it in these moments of challenge that we're living in, at least.
Challenge. That's awesome. No, I couldn't agree more. I've always been a fan. Super excited to work with you all at Firefly. It's a privilege and an honor as well. Love the work, and definitely am excited. It's interesting kind of as you position I like the kind of way you positioned that, like the progressive side in the queer space and the queer space.
I am the communications director, so yes.
Yeah.
Better.
Yeah. So I think that's awesome, but really great work. So for you, as you say, these challenging times we're in, I know, because fine, I'm in my 50s. I've only been through certain cycles. My dad is in his 70s. He's always like, oh, he's that voice of like, dude, like this is nothing compared to what was happening in the 60s. Like there was literally just like craziness in the streets all over the place. Like, we're going to get through this. It's going to be fine. I feel like the world is ending, but I don't know
Mhm.
from your perspective. I'm like, how do you feel or see it? Obviously, storied career. How are you putting like what's going on right now in comparison to what you've been through? How does that feel?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. You mentioned your dad. My dad was born in Italy, raised in Italy. He grew up as a teenager under Mussolini, so he always
Oh,
had a lot of things to say about this. He's passed away. He would be really unhappy to know that they just elected Mussolini's granddaughter
I
to be
know.
the president, which is really annoying. She's horrible. I won't even say her name. But
No.
I mean, I think that for those of us who have been doing this a long time, and I haven't been doing it as long as folks on whose shoulders I stand, many of whom are still around to talk to
Right.
and talk with, like Miss Major and Mandy Carter, and so many folks who actually come to create change. We have been here before in the sense that our culture, but also particularly the queer community, we've been through the in the 40s and 50s when anyone who they figured out was queer was they were getting lobotomies, they were being put in mental
Yeah.
institutions. We've
Yes.
lived through the Lavender Scare. We've lived
Yeah.
through the Stonewall riots and the other uprisings that happened in the late 60s and early 70s. We were decimated by the AIDS pandemic. I mean,
Sure.
that I was, I really began my activism in the late 80s, early 90s. And we were actually talking about this at the task force staff retreat recently, and it really brought several of us of a certain age to tears to talk about how we would have, a suit in our office on the back door, back of the office door, because there was a funeral
All the
not
time.
once a
Yeah.
week, several times a week,
Yeah.
and the government wouldn't. We had a president that wouldn't even say the word AIDS. Never mind acknowledge or fund research or
Right.
provide, any medical kind of support. We had to take care of each other, and so
100%.
I think that you put that into perspective, but at the same time, this period we're in now is really terrifying in many ways because it feels like we're slipping, and we are slipping into authoritarianism.
Yeah.
We're seeing a white Christian nationalist agenda being the Project 2025. I mean, they're
Yeah.
just
Just being
checking
like,
the clock
yes.
every day, and I
Yeah.
think that's something that we really need to talk about as a community, as a culture,
Yeah.
as a movement. Like, how do we get through this? Because I think we will get through it. I have complete confidence that we will get through this if we do it together, and we do it in a way that is not just reactive to what's happening in this moment, but is also thinking forward as to
Mhm.
when that pendulum swings back, and it always does,
Right.
right? How do we repair the damage that was done? And there was
Right.
a lot of damage being
Oh,
done
yeah.
to a lot of people. And then how do we move forward from that?
Yeah. I think that's right. I think the biggest thing is, I mean, as much as it feels like you say, in the 80s and 90s, whatever, obviously it was very sort of oppressive and repressive, but I don't feel like it was as, maybe, I guess it wasn't quite as overt, the dismantling of even like our institutions. So there was obviously just all the isms and the horrible things were happening in the 80s and 90s, but it didn't feel like it was such an onslaught on like the fabric of our
I mean,
democracy.
trying to dismantle our democracy. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
Like,
what they're doing. The administration is
yeah.
trying to dismantle our democracy, and as I've said to several people, it's like he's got a shredder in the
It's
Oval
just like
Office, and the Constitution is going right into the shredder.
every
It's
day.
really, and they've got the courts. I mean, all the branches are now under the
Like,
control of folks who are not really interested in,
yeah.
another election, for
Yeah,
example, and
exactly. For
voting
example.
rights, and I think that's what's really scary, and
Yeah.
we should absolutely be scared. But I
Yeah.
think that should also be what motivates folks to do things maybe that they haven't done before, think about things differently, or get engaged in a different way.
In a different way. Good segue. There's two things I would like to touch on from your perspective while we
Mhm.
have you. Definitely one of them is the idea of, it does feel like the Constitution's in the shredder. Feels like we're living with the very real threat of, if there is an election, like we traditionally obviously have gotten involved, different things, get out, register folks, GOTV, get people motivated, get them to the polls. But I feel like, are we doing that? Like, is that, or are we trying to activate and mobilize in different ways? Because it feels like I don't understand how we're possibly going to have free and fair elections, coming up. So then it feels like we're completely disempowered. So I feel like we have to mobilize in different ways.
Yes, it's mobilizing in different ways, but also in ways that we always have,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's about getting back to basics, like our field team, they're on the ground.
Yeah.
Things are not quite as visible or public maybe, but we're still going to go door to door. We're still going to be meeting as organizations, as leaders in groups. We can do it in person. We can do it virtually. I mean, we have this amazing organizing committee that gets together several times a month. We're putting together a boot camp for folks who do want to get engaged, but who have not done this kind of work before and are now inspired. We need to create spaces for folks to really learn what it means to build power, what it means to raise money, what it means to organize people and have an impact, right? I mean, I think we also, like I said, we have to think about this as a longer game. Like we will do our field team is terrific, and they've been doing work in Central Florida for a long time. We might be working on, right?
Yeah.
Talk about belly of the beast, right? Talk about, elections where it was pretty known that it was going to be an uphill battle is an understatement, but that doesn't mean that you don't make progress, even if you lose that battle.
100%.
You are trying to, I hate to use that analogy, but like win the war, right? That's the kind of commitment and understanding and context that I think people need to really be able to survive this time. This is also something that, I mean, we talk about a lot at the task force, not just, amongst ourselves and the staff, but like with the folks that we work with, and whether it's at our Create Change conference every year, there's a balance here. We have to take care of each other because nobody else can do it.
Right.
Well, we always say, who protects us? We protect us, right?
Ourselves,
so there's a combination of like being active, doing the work and managing the trauma and the anger and all of the challenges that come with that by taking care of ourselves and taking care of others. And I'm very serious about that. I mean, our taking care of our own mental health, taking care of our own physical health, and taking care of each other in community, especially for those who might be in situations where they may not have family support, or they may live in a rural area where there may not be a lot of queer people, and they're more isolated, or they're part of our community that is more marginalized. They're a Black trans woman is going to need a whole lot different and potentially more support than I will, right? Sitting in my privilege. And so I think it's really important that we put all of these things into that kind of context as we try to find a way to get through this together and survive it.
Right. And I think your other point was a good one. Where and how do we want to build back toward? What are we trying to build? So when the pendulum swings back the other way, what are we going to be creating right now that hopefully helps us build back stronger, more, broaden the community, bring more folks in, and actually create a space that, I don't know, will be, able to withstand some of this. I feel like right now it's this constant last grasp. I keep thinking it's the last grasp of the white nationalist male power grab. So it keeps coming back and it keeps coming back. But you're like,
that's like when I say, oh, there's no bottom. There's no bottom with these folks. There's no bottom. There's nothing they won't do.
No, it's pretty horrifying and disgusting. Yeah.
The other thing is really like the reality is that, white Christian nationalism it's part of the fabric of this country.
It really is.
It's part of how we were founded. Like,
I know.
I was in Italy on vacation, but at the same time, we went to Pride in Naples, Italy, which was phenomenal. Such a great experience to be. It was the first international Pride I'd ever been to, my wife as well, and we were with some friends. I was asked to be on a panel to talk about civil rights, both in Europe and internationally, by some friends and colleagues. And I sat with and spoke with, she's the vice president of the European Union Parliament. Like it was pretty heavy hitters. And I think the way I talked about this country came as a surprise to a lot of people in the audience. I think they were expecting, rah-rah, flag waving. I'm like, I love this country, but I also see it for what it is.
Exactly.
And I see the flaws and I see the contradictions and I see the tremendous sort of disconnect from reality in some ways that people have when they talk about this country and don't want to talk about the actual history, don't want to talk about colonization, don't want to talk about slavery, don't want to talk about the way women have been treated or queer people have been treated. Like or just the puritanical nature of this country that has really caused so much suffering for so many of us. And they were stunned. It was great.
I like, good. Well done. I think that's what I'm also a little horrified of, is all the things we're hearing about, obviously the washing over history and trying to like make it, erase some of that truth. We're like, no,
I
no,
mean,
no.
one of the really most powerful things that I was able to help work on just in the first few months of the administration was when they removed trans and queer people from the Stonewall National Park from the website. So,
Yeah.
but we did a few things. So of course we organized a big protest, and it was phenomenal. I mean, that's a tiny park, and we had over 1,000 people. They didn't even fit. They had to like stand outside on Christopher Street.
Yeah.
And and that was super powerful because we knew that the majority of the people that were there were allies, right?
Yeah.
And it really was a very mobilizing thing, because sometimes that's what it takes for people to see something. It's not abstract. It was very specific and distinct, and it was very clearly an attempt, because they did essentially erase us by removing us, right, from
Terrifying.
and removing trans and queer people from that website for a national monument.
Right.
And then, during Pride, a few weeks later, some of us, may or may not have surreptitiously planted some trans flags, because they didn't put any trans flags for Pride. They had rainbow flags,
Oh my
not
goodness.
progress flags. They had like the old school rainbow flag.
Yeah.
And, there might have been some zip ties and trans flags planted in the park
Hey.
by some of us in an act of defiance, some good trouble, as John
Good
Lewis would
trouble.
say.
Oh yeah. Love it. Love the good trouble. Yeah. So speaking of that, that's a good example of a story that I'm sure most people didn't hear about, or didn't, weren't, unless you're right there in your local, or you're really tuned into the,
It was in the middle of New York Pride, so
right.
a lot of people saw it, but yeah.
That's good. That's good. Obviously, like, again, how it gets talked about, or those kinds of stories get spread around. One of the things that I struggle about, and we were talking about earlier, is the idea of how, and where to find, because I believe that obviously just independent journalism right now is critical to our survival, because that's where, real information is actually being disseminated, which we all desperately need, because we can see that mainstream media is getting gobbled up by either they're already controlled by the right in this sort of shitstorm that we're in, or they're just kind of complacent in this like reporting on the garbage that just gets the clicks, and don't really try to be true like journalists. So I'm really excited that you are where you are. I'd love to hear about, like, that's a great nugget of a good story, but if there's other, it's like, I feel like we're just also in a downtrodden cycle of spin cycle of garbage and hate and, all the bad. And I'm always like, gosh, could we just talk about some good stories, some things that people are doing out there, some acts of defiance, there is some fighting back, like what is actually happening. And then second point to that is maybe places you could help us and our listeners hear more about, like, where could we go to get good real news, good information, to either just at least know what's happening, and or to get tuned back in and get involved in helping when you're able, taking care of your own mental health, when you're able to get back involved in helping on the resistance side.
Yeah, I mean, to back up a little bit, there are two things I've said this for 30 years. The mainstream media in particular, it's a business.
Right.
And it's going to ebb and flow and be better or not, often based on the economy,
Right.
And I think the advent of social media really shook things up, because we now have places where folks can be citizen journalists, right? Which I love. And one of the things that has really, it's flourishing in terms of demand, and what we need to do is figure out how to help it flourish economically, financially, and be supported, is community media, whether that's Black media, whether that's Latino, Spanish language media, or whether that's queer media. So, I know that, I mean, basically the way I would put it is like, if you're just looking at any one of those, you're going to get something skewed. So find a diverse set of outlets, because what we've done, which is really, I think, a big part of the problem, is that we've all siloed ourselves. I watch MSNBC, and then I'll put Fox News on just to see what's happening on Earth too. Like just because they're always talking about something completely different. That's for sure.
It's true.
Whether it's related to our issues, or no matter what it is. And then there are places I go for both the hard news that I look for about queer news, issues, events, things that are happening, but
Mhm.
also my people, my culture, movies, theater, music, all of
Yeah.
those things,
Yeah.
Um, and so I go to those places as they, I vary, right? You got to
Sure.
hop around. You got to shop
That's
around.
key.
If you
That's
really
key.
put yourself in one space, you're not going to get a good, a variety or picture of sort of what's going on.
Right.
And then I think there are standouts, right? So like when it comes to queer media, we have the Advocate, we have LGBTQ Nation, we have News is Out, which is a consortium, nonprofit
Oh.
consortium. I mean, the media is trying to adapt to what's happening, right?
Mhm.
We mentioned this when we were backstage getting ready. So there's a report coming out in the next few weeks that's basically a mapping study of queer media across the country, local queer media, not
Mm.
national, but local.
Yeah.
Because most people get their news from local media. That's the reality. They're not getting
True.
it from, it used to be the networks and then it was the cable stations. A lot of people focus on their local media to get the news about the things that they care about, right?
Right.
So the challenge is that huge demand that's happening for local queer media is not they're not keeping up in terms of the staffing and the resources that they need to do their jobs really well, because the work they do is excellent, right? They're going to be fair and accurate, and they're going to try to cover as diverse as possible a set of stories and parts of our community, right? But at the same time, these are outlets that may have two or three people doing them. I mean, like
I
it's
know. It's
so
crazy.
if you the reality of how under resourced community media is in general is amazing.
It
And
is.
I think that we're trying to find creative ways to get accurate, fair, diverse reporting out there. There's some
Exactly.
really amazing folks who are doing podcasting,
Yeah.
right? Organizations like the task force. We're
Right.
doing, we have a series on our Instagram page called X is a Queer Issue. And that X could be it to help people understand from an intersectional standpoint, like housing, voting rights. Those are queer issues. Why? We
Right.
bring in
Why?
experts who work in
How?
conversation with
Yeah.
Benjamin Coy on
Mhm.
our staff.
Mhm.
And they're very successful because they talk about things in a way that gives people a new perspective and also informs them and educates them, right? Or you
Love
can
it.
go to folks like V Spear, who does Under the Desk News, right? So you're
Yeah.
going to get really good news. These folks who are, for lack of a better phrase, like citizen journalists and influencers, they were all at the Democratic National Convention when I was there. There were
Yeah.
like dozens of these folks
Yeah.
who are posting things on TikTok, on Instagram, on Twitter, sort of still, Facebook, other places. They have access to millions and millions of people. And I think the key for a consumer is to seek out the folks that are doing their jobs well, that are covering the issues that they care about in ways that will help them make sense of what's going on.
Love it.
And
Love
that's,
it.
and that takes some effort because you
It
can't
does.
just turn on
Yeah,
the
you
TV
can't
or go
just
to the
slip
computer.
on whatever and
That's
expect that
right.
it's gonna be
Yep.
thoughtful, insightful, behind the garbage, actual real stories. I think those are the things that we in this country, because of also the dismantling of education, we are not taught to be, critical thinkers. We're not, kids in this country are not raised to be like questioning
Right.
and thinking about things and looking behind and saying, is this real? And obviously, while the proliferation of social media has been good to get other voices, it also it brings a lot of garbage to the surface as
Well, I mean,
well.
that's the yeah, we that those are, these are big challenges. So the
Yes.
two biggest ones I see are, one, people's attention spans have
Yeah.
dwindled to like literally like I think they said like like 21 seconds or
Oh yeah.
something on social
On a
media.
good
Like
day.
a goldfish has a longer
Yes. It's
than a
pathetic.
goldfish has a longer attention span. And the other thing is the proliferation of misinformation, particularly with the use of AI.
Yeah. It's
That's a big topic of conversation at this conference this weekend.
I
And
bet.
we have Ina Fried will be here from Axios, who's
Yeah.
this extraordinary, probably one of the most visible trans tech reporters or reporters, period, in the country.
Yeah.
She's amazing, and she is incredibly expert and has incredible expertise around AI, where it is, where it's going, how it's going to impact our lives. And I'm super excited to hear from those kinds of folks here, because it is affecting our work as
It is.
organizations, as
It is.
advocates, and it is certainly impacting anyone who's consuming media, particularly on social media, because
To get at the truth, yeah, you can get
it's fake.
it is. It's, I mean, I hate to say it, but like now I think that the day that the first time I heard the alternative facts, and all this fake news stuff, and I'm like, God, it's just crazy
Yeah.
how far we've come so quickly. And the
Mhm.
idea of like what is
Yeah.
trying to verify, information at this point is like a full-time job, to be like,
Yep.
wait, is this actually credible? Is this actually factual, not some garbage facts like that
Well, and
people
it's too easy to just share stuff. It's
Yeah,
it's
people go, oh,
it's so simple. You see something and you have this visceral reaction to it,
you
and then
share
you're
it,
like, oh my God, I have to share this. And you fact check it before you share it.
fact
Like
check it.
there's this rumor going around. There have been several now. It's a whole cascade of them. So Stephen Colbert's show was taken up. He's off CBS.
Right.
I live in the same town as Stephen Colbert. I love Stephen Colbert and
Oh,
his
yeah.
wife, Evie. She's fantastic. She runs our film festival in Montclair, New Jersey. She's great.
Nice.
And there are all these rumors, like now that he's not doing the show, like what is he doing? So now there's the rumors that, he's going to have a show with Rachel Maddow, or he's going to have a show with this one. And people keep posting all this stuff. And if you look at the comments, oh, thank goodness he's coming back. None of it's true.
None of it.
Absolutely none of it's true.
Yeah.
But it's too easy to see something like that, get excited about it,
Yeah.
and post it on your Instagram page or your Facebook page.
Absolutely. So
yeah.
I guess as we wrap up and want to let you get back into the amazingness
Sure.
of your conference, first I want to appreciate you for joining us and sharing all that great, amazing information. I'll share the transcript, because I want to make sure we highlight some of these alternative media sources you're talking about. I think that's a critical piece of information for folks who are yearning and really striving to find the news behind the news, like the real stories on the street, and to get informed and really figure out how they can, get involved in their local communities. Because I think we obviously can figure out right now that it's going to take a community movement right now across, but it is like connecting communities to other communities. You can't obviously isolate ourselves and operate in community silos. The key there is then how do we, bridge those communities together to really create the groundswelling of change and movement that we need to see in this country right now to fight back against the craziness that's seems to be overtaking. I'm equally concerned about the craziness and the complacency. I just on the same, so I'm like, we have to find and help activate folks who do care and help them, give them real ways to make a difference and stand up and get involved again as they're able.
It's hard. It's easy to, I'm not seeing complacency. I'm seeing actually people rising up in a way that I think we haven't seen in a long time. And that's just, all I have to do is take the New Jersey Transit into Manhattan to see all the people that get in the streets for these protests. I've been to some of them.
Yeah.
And to see what's happening across the country. One of my favorite things to watch is Rachel Maddow's only on Mondays, but one of the things she makes sure she does is she shows like half a dozen or more protests that are happening around the country. Some of them with 10 or 15 people in a tiny rural town. But
that's a big turnout.
People are standing up at town halls, they're getting in the streets, and these are folks who have not done that before.
Yeah.
These are not, seasoned activists for decades. This is not my cohorts, right? It's folks who are waking up, which we joked prior, like that's why they call it woke, because you realize what the heck is going on, and it's a good thing to be woke. And I think that the challenge is, how do we encourage folks and support them in knowing that this isn't like a short-term thing. You're going to have to commit. This is a marathon, not a sprint, and be able to deal with, when, and I will say when, because I am a positive person, when the pendulum swings back, we're going to have to repair so much damage that's been done to institutions, to people, to communities, to lives, like in this country and frankly around the world by this administration.
Absolutely.
And then how do we rebuild? And how do we do that? And it's not too early to start thinking about that now.
Exactly.
Like, how do we do that and do it in a way where we are also, again, like I said, balancing the work with taking care of ourselves? Because I wouldn't be able to have done this work for 30 something years if I didn't have the support system I have, just my own personal wherewithal to take care of myself, and try and balance things. And because if you don't do that, it's really, really easy to people become complacent. I think they
Right.
aren't naturally complacent.
No, I get, yeah, because you do get burned out too, and you have to like tune
Yeah.
out to take care. So yes, balancing that I think is key. So definitely looking for ways and opportunities. I'm very happy you share like those ideas and thoughts and places of hope and resistance that are happening. And I do agree, like I'm seeing it. I just again wish, and I'll just wish into oblivion that like it's covered and talked about in the mainstream media in a different way than it currently is, which is why we have to find our way to alternative media to actually find out that it is
Mhm.
happening. Because if you don't look deeper, it looks very much on the surface like everyone's doing a collective shrug about the tyranny that's happening right now, when actually we're not. And so we have to actually say, you know what? Other people need to hear and see those stories. So I'd love to share. And maybe I'll pick your brain after another time to get like an even more extensive list, or if you have other lists that you can share of us of other
Oh,
media
absolutely.
sources for
Happy
folks,
to.
would be
Yeah.
great to share. So yeah, thanks so much for some hope, some encouragement, some real talk. We didn't even talk about tech and AI very much. We kind of snuck it in at the end, but I'm excited to hear. And I don't know if any of your sessions are sort of rebroadcast or transcripted out or whatever, but I'd love to hear that conversation on AI in particular, because that's an area that we talk about a lot and we care about a lot.
Well, we will certainly be talking about it at our Creating Change conference in
Okay,
January
awesome.
in
Great.
Washington, D.C. That you can put
Okay.
in the chat.
Yeah,
Just
we have to.
creatingchange.org. I
We
mean,
want to promote, yeah, people coming to Creating Change for sure.
and that's the thing about the queer community. We have, as a rule, this is not, I don't think, a stereotype. I think it's actually true. We're early adopters of a lot of these things, and
Yeah,
we're also skeptical. So like there are good things about AI. There are some very good things and very useful things. And
yeah,
then there are some things that we really need to really look at and keep an eye on. And I think that's the conversation to have.
absolutely. Yeah. That's a
Absolutely.
perfect segue to my guest next week. It's actually Ben Childers, founder and CEO of Strativation. And we are literally going to be talking about, he started these little meetups to talk about the cool/scary shit that's
Yep.
happening with AI. And we're doing like local meetups around the country about it and bringing different
Nice.
folks together to talk about some of the ways that it's amazing and awesome and things to be really aware of and like keep in check as this, new technology really starts to take hold and really transforms just about every aspect of our lives, I would say.
Mhm.
So I'm excited to hear that. Definitely excited to hear that's how that's going to be talked about in Creating Change. So Cathy Renna, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate you and all the work that you're doing and everything you do to help keep yourself staying sane and healthy and grounded and in the face of very difficult times and difficult work they're doing. So appreciate you.
Same. Thanks so much, Jen. Appreciate you.
Thank you.